Thank you. All right. So what I did was, well, actually, I didn't do much already, but what I did was stuff that you guys already know. So I created an HTML file, a JavaScript file. I linked to that JavaScript file. I then created a div. I then have an ID of timing. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to include jQuery. So minified. And then I want to put that for here. And then I can do document.ready. So what does the document.ready do again?
Waits for the page to finish loading, and then it executes the JavaScript.
Yes. Waits for the page to load and then executes JavaScript. Excellent. Okay. Okay. So now what we're going to do is, so now we have everything pretty good over here. We can start executing our JavaScript because this is not going to execute until our HTML page is done loading, right? So we have our JavaScript, and this would normally execute first before here, but what's going to happen is this JavaScript is now going to wait for all of this to finish loading, and then it's going to execute. So now inside of here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do set timeout. And let's just do 2 seconds. So the first argument, oh, this is getting confused, you guys. This is a ES6. Yeah. So the first argument to set timeout is the function that you want to execute. The second is after how much time. So you have the first one being like, okay, what I want to do is, now I created this timing div. So in here, I'm going to target timing. So I'm going to say timing. So how I target that using jQuery would be that. And then I can just do .html, and I can just say time's up. I was thinking of like some Arnold Schwarzenegger quote, but I can't think of any. So let's start this off with, I don't know, there's still time. Still time. And then let's see if this works the way I want it to. So a couple of seconds pass, and then it goes time's up. Cool. So that works the way I want it to. I can even make this a little bit more complex. So I can even put like an H1 inside of there, or maybe like an H3, something like that. So it waits a couple seconds, and then it replaces it with time's up. So basic usage of the set timeout function. So Ted, you were also asking about using functions, I think?
Yeah, I think I was just confused about so for this example we did with the set timeout and also like the stopwatch that we did, but with setting like interval IDs and like a decrement function.
So did you mean like if I want to then cancel out this timing?
I think my question is like, could you use the method that we use for the stopwatch, but with this function?
Which method?
Like setting the decrement function, and then a variable time, and then time -1 each time, and then.
So you want to decrement something? Well, that's an interval, so not timeout then, right?
Yeah, the interval ID.
The set interval. Okay. So then what we can do is we can start off. So then that's going to require something else. So what I can do is set up a decrement function. Oh, and then My roommate's here, so I don't wanna disturb anybody. Let me just go to my room and do this. Okay. Okay. So is the question, I want to know how to set up a decrement function?
Yeah, and then using the interval ID variable, I guess.
And then using the interval ID to do, I think,
Maybe just like counting down from like 10 seconds.
okay, so we don't need to use the interval ID in order to count down. What we can do is just do this. For example, I can set some time in here. So I can just leave this as timing, and then we can just put let me make this easier. I'll just set this as an H1. So what I'm going to do is, in order to solve this problem of decrementing, I need to first set up a number that's going to be constantly changed in memory. So I'm going to have to set a var initial num equals 100. And then what we can do is, yeah, I'll take that. So then I have to think about the problem. So I say, okay, if I set the initial number to 100, that's going to be what gets stored into the output. And then I can change that over time with the decrement function. The decrement function is going to take the set interval. So then let's solve for the problem. Okay, so why don't we write this out in the true problem solving way? Okay, so problem. Write a function that will decrement yeah, I don't think I'm gonna give a tour of my house. Maybe some other time. That will decrement the number on start. Let's just start off with something simple. So in order to do that, what I will do is break it down to further problems. So first, creating a function that contains decrement. Next would be setting up the function for decrementing. So the contents function for decrementing, executing function call. I think before that, actually, setting up HTML and JavaScript for the function. Okay, so actually, let's put functionality. So I've broken down the function or the problem into different parts. So the first part we already fixed, which is why I didn't put it in there. But just thinking about the problem itself, I have to set up HTML and JavaScript for the functionality. So I already did that. So now I want to create a function that contains the decrement. So why don't I do function? It's going to be called decrement. And then every time it's called, So this is going to be the second part. So every time function decrement is called, it will do something to decrease the amount of a number. So it will probably be maintaining state and then displaying the updated state to the output. So again, I'm not trying to memorize any solution. Like it would have been easy to just go back to a solution we covered. But remembering the concepts and understanding like how to solve problems is much more important in case like you have something where someone says like, oh, well, why don't I change this? What do I want to change that? Or what do I want to add something? So you go back to solving the problem and then you can remember the concepts of how to solve the problem. So this is going to happen on every second. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, so I want to, let's just set this to num. Because we don't need to separate num and initial num. So we're going to do num minus minus. This will decrease it in memory. So that'll, what I'm thinking is if I execute this, first I need to have something that's going to get updated. So in here, this is where I'm solving for that. I kind of did in my head, but let's just solve for it out loud. So set up an initial number for to maintain state of num. In here, decrease state of num by 1. Yeah. So I have a decreased state of num. So again, I think about how the order of operations are going to go. So the first thing that happens is it's going to look at this. It's going to then have this function. One part that I didn't finish when I went through from top to bottom is in this part, I did set up the HTML and JavaScript for the functionality, but I never set up the initial value that's going to display. So what I'm going to do let me see. So the first time I want, let's see, what is this called again? Timing. The first time I want timing dot let's just do dot text. I want it to be num. So no matter what, this function is not going to execute yet. And what I'm going to do is say, okay, when this first starts off, I want the number to be set to this number when it begins. So if it's like a timer, whatever it is, it could start off at like 30. We can just set this to 30. And let's just see if that works, right? Cool. So right now, nothing's executing, but we are displaying 30 to the page. Okay. So next, I'm solving for the problem of setting up the HTML and JavaScript for the functionality. I think that's pretty much set up. I might have to return back to it if I didn't finish that up. And creating a function that contains the decrement functionality. So I created that function. And then it's going to set up contents of function for decrementing. So this is the part where I had to update this part. So I said, okay, I need to maintain state. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to decrease it by 1. So every time decrement is called, I'm going to use set interval. Okay. So now let's see what happens if I just call decrement. So we're going to test this out. Oh, I already see a mistake. I didn't replace that. So dot text and then num. So this should set it to 29 at least once. right? Okay, excellent. So what happened was this function decrement executed, let's see. So this executed once. So notice that it's not executing again because we don't have a condition that says keep running set interval X amount of times and then it will work, all right? So we can do is we can set this in a while loop, or we can do all the functionality in one place. I think it's easiest to have some kind of basic condition to run, and so the decrement function will continue going until something's finished. So we might not actually need the set interval function in order to have the timer, although it would be best to do so. Yeah. So what we can do is do something like this. So the condition is while num is greater than 0, the set interval will run, right? And once it hits 0, or once this condition is false, then this will stop. So let's just set this to some small number like 5 or something, just so we don't wait 30 seconds each time. Oop, I might have set an infinite loop. Let's see, what did I do? While num is greater than 0, decrement. This should decrease it by 1 each time. And so actually, yeah, that wouldn't, I don't think that would run into. Is my decrement outside of the loop? Yeah, but that doesn't matter. So if I call decrement once, it should execute this. What happens is, I might run into a weird issue because I'm calling this. Yeah, generally the while loop. That should still not run into an issue though. Let me see. Am I overthinking this problem? I might be overthinking it. Yeah, it is running into an infinite loop problem.
Is the decrement in the wrong spot?
Decrement is correct. Set interval. Sending it to that.
Would you want to put like the number minus minus inside the while loop, or?
It wouldn't matter though. So I can just set this to another condition. I can just say, what am I doing wrong? All right, now I'm gonna do some fancy stuff. Oh, I'm being stupid. Less than or equal to, okay. Yeah, it's still running to infinite loop. What? I don't see a logic problem though. Yeah, it might. I'm gonna look over this later. So what I'll do is just take this out and then that should work though. That's weird. Right. Yeah. So the first time that was correct. I corrected that. So it says, oh, it's like you're only calling decrement once. Oh, you're right. The yeah, you guys are right. I think the num minus, yeah, you guys are right. So the while loop needs to contain the minus minus. Okay. That might work. So the while loop should execute multiple times. Yeah, okay. I wasn't thinking about context. Now that should work. If it doesn't, okay. Now that just went super fast because, oh my God, asynchronicity. Okay. All right. Let me come up with a better solution that doesn't do it in like 2 seconds. So what's happening is this num minus minus now is not waiting for this to happen. So because it's asynchronous, the num minus minus is executing immediately 5 times, and then it's not waiting for the set interval. So let me think of a better solution on the fly. You just set interval when num gets to 0, you clear interval. Right, but that won't solve this because what's happening is num minus minus will just immediately set timeout instead of the while loop alongside the set interval. No, because that still sets it to the global object, or the global context. So what's happening is the num minus minus is immediately going to go. So what I'll do, instead of using a while loop, I'll have to refactor. So I have to rethink this now. So I want it to decrease by 1. And then every time it's going to do a set, it's going to decrease by 1 on the page. I'm only causing, I think what's happening is I need to do set interval, and then I need to call decrement in here. Well, yeah. Okay, I think that's the issue. So now decrement, what it's gonna do is it decreases num by 1, and then it displays let's see, so which one is this? Timing, okay. Okay, text, and then num. All right, so now we have the set interval set globally, the function being modularized. What? Why am I on my first group? Whatever. Okay. All right, so let's see. This should work. I can't see anything. All right, that works. Okay, cool. Now it goes infinitely, but at least it works. Okay. Yeah, so that was my fault. I forgot about the context within set interval and how it works. The set interval is set globally, and I forgot about that. So a couple of issues were that the set timeout and the set interval are different than most other functions, meaning that they're tied to the window object. Second, another thing that I did wrong was that I set a loop with the set interval inside where one is synchronous and the other one is asynchronous. So the num will just immediately, like, it will just go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and it's not going to wait for the set interval to finish. So in order to fix that, what I would have to do is something that I just showed you, which is creating the set interval, putting it outside of the function context, and the function should just be utilized for containing all the functionality I want to happen each time an interval occurs. So now that we refactored that, now let's take a look at how to fix it. So if it goes down to 0, we do a clear interval. So now we're going to do, let's do var, I don't know, decrementing ID, and then we'll do if so we'll do like something like so now we're solving for if num is less than or equal to 0, then what we do is we're going to clear the interval. So we say clear interval, pass in decrementing ID. It should work. So now I want to think about it from top to bottom again. So I say, okay, anytime I do a little fix or a little change, I want to test it. So and then I think about it from top to bottom. I say, okay, what's going to happen? So the page is going to load. This set interval is going to start. This is calling the decrement function. The decrement function is a declared function, so this gets hosted to the top anyway. I have the decrementing ID being referenced now when I execute this. When the application first starts, it's going to have the num inside of the timing. The num is going to decrease by 1 when I first call it. It's also going to change that display to show the latest number. And what's going to happen is if the number is less than or equal to 0, it's going to clear the interval. So actually, I think I want this functionality, now that I'm thinking about it, I want it to clear before it shows. So if it goes to like -1, actually, no, it's fine. I put it as less than or equals to. So if it goes to 0, I do want to show 0. So if I did less than 0, it would show -1, but less than or equals to is fine. Okay, so now what we want to do is we display that to the page, and then we have something that clears the interval. So that way it's not continuously decrementing. So why don't we test this out? So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and then it should stop here. And it does. Okay, cool. So that's what we wanted. All right, so now we have a decrementer that works the way we want it to. Whew. Cool. So questions about that?
Could you possibly Slack out like just this block of code?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Was this too confusing? I mean, I feel I tried to like isolate it so it was like as small as possible. So hopefully it's not too bad. Here, let me wrap it in something. I didn't want to overcomplicate it with doing like crazy shit. Let's just put a new folder. Blah. It's called blah. And then I'll compress this and I'll send it out. Monday, Wednesday. No, this is just instructor resources. I'll probably be custom. Okay. Cool. All right, so Stevie was asking about recursion. I guess we can go over that because you could have solved one of the problems using recursion, but we are going to be going over recursion this week, I think. I don't know. If there's no other questions, I'll go over recursion. I just don't want to. I want to do more review than newer concepts. So let's see. If there's no other new questions, then I'll go over recursion. So any other questions that are existing? Oh, it says, when it comes to homework, would you recommend we write out the questions and answers in JavaScript or the HTML? Where do you mean the questions and the answers? Adimachi?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I guess what I was trying to figure out was I was looking up sort of like examples for inspiration as to how trivia games were kind of built by different people. And one thing I saw was when they were writing out the questions, you know, just the full questions and the answers, some did it all in the HTML while others did it in the JavaScript solely and had like a questions variable in the HTML instead. So
Oh,
I was
gotcha.
curious, yeah, which method maybe
Okay.
like if the method matters or
Yes.
if there's a preferred method to go about that.
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's like, do you dynamically have the questions and the answers generated from JavaScript, or do you have them preset in HTML? Since we're programmers, I want you to do it dynamic. It would be preferable to have it dynamically generated from probably like a JSON file.
So JavaScript would be the most preferred?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because yeah, no worries. Because the reason being that we're going to assume that we don't have the questions and answers, they're coming from a database. So that we want to assume that because, you know, when we store things like this, we generally be storing in a database. So when we make a query to the database, it's coming back as JSON. So just set it into JSON files for now, or JavaScript objects, and then dynamically putting that information in there. That's the preferable method. If you guys have a different way of doing it, again, right now, I just care about you guys doing it rather than doing it the more or most efficient way. So any other questions before we go into recursion? Okay, so let's go into recursion. So question is, it's a good question. What types of problems do you want to solve with recursion rather than a different method? So recursion is the concept of a function calling itself in order to reach an answer. So for example, if I have a function over here. Wait, why was this deleted? Did I delete it? Really? Oh, I guess I did. Huh. Okay, hold on. On to your butts. All right. Blah. No. On. There we go. All right. So let's say we have a function. So what's a good one? I'm just gonna put something random. So let's say that you have a function, and I mean, the typical answer that everyone gives is the Fibonacci sequence, where the function calls itself. I don't want to go into that because that gets into stack and heap, actually, where recursion gets a little silly and confusing. But let's just think of something where we have a function calling itself, right? So first off, there's two things inside of a function for recursion. When you have a recursive function, you have first the function itself, and you have an exit condition for that function. So the exit condition we're going to set first. We're going to say if I don't know, exit, then what I'm going to do is return. else. Actually, let's just do something here. So then we're gonna say, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's just start off with a crappy example. I already see a chat over here. But I want to just do the cobweb example. No, the cobweb example is actually really tough. The cobweb one is not easy because that is using recursion to go through a deeply nested object, which would actually take hours to display. So that's definitely not one that we want to go over right now. So the one from the in-class exercise, there's one that it says do recursion to go over, is actually for like if you're feeling really like in for a challenge, and let's say you have a deeply nested object and you wanted a way to access any part of the deeply nested object and use recursion to do it. That's actually a really great example of recursion, but it's also a really hard example of recursion. Because what that means is you have to set something up so it knows previous and forward state, meaning like where you are and then where's like the next thing and where's the previous thing. And then you want to then be able to then just determine based on those values what to find and stuff as you're going through this tree. So it actually gets kind of crazy. I want to first start off with a basic example of recursion. So a basic example, I mean, this would be a basic example. This is going to be an infinite loop because it never exits, but what we can do is say, you know, actually, let's do num plus plus. Oh, we already used num. This is kind of complicated because I'm using multiple things instead of one that I already used something else for. Let's just do var number equal sum num equals 5. I don't know. I'm trying to use a similar example, not trying to make it too complicated. Yeah, here's something simple. Okay. Okay. So that should be okay. Okay. So now we can run this. So, oh, no, it ran into an infinite loop. Shit. So there's something in this loop. Some 5. Return, or is it break? No, it should. Break statement. Illegal break statement? It should be return or break. Oh, I'm not incrementing or decrement. You're right. You're totally right. I forgot that I took that out. Okay. Sum num. Thank you. Yeah, so I keep forgetting my own workflow. So why don't we do this? The first thing that happens is this is going to be set to 5. Next, this is going to increase. All right, sorry. We start this off at 0. So this starts off at 0. You increase it by 1. Then it's going to display that number. It's going to check. And then I'm going to take out break. It should be return instead of a function. And then what's going to do is it's going to call itself. So it's going to call the function itself until it reaches this exit condition. So that's what's supposed to happen. Okay. Jesus, nope. This is still running to an infinite stack. Oh, you're right. It will keep initializing to 0. Yep, you were totally right. I was hoping to do it with, oh, you know what? I wanted to do it with a parameter coming in. Yeah, okay. But it's okay. That should still work now. Nope. Hold on. Let's see. Yeah, so that works, but I don't want it to show. Oh, okay. Sorry. Now it should work. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That works. Cool. Yeah. So Stevie was right. I wasn't thinking about. Again, I'm not following my own workflow. I don't know why I'm not doing that. I have to think about from beginning to end and testing out each step what's going to happen. So what happened was this function has some num plus plus being called the first time it executes. So I'm calling it here to execute it once. And what happens is it's calling the sum num. It's then going to display some num. So this is going to, when I first execute, it's going to display 1. It's going to say if it's greater or equal 5. Then it's going to exit the function. So remember, return always exits the function. In this case, it will return with null. And then it's going to call itself. So this is calling itself. So then this hey will execute until this finishes. You might be thinking it's like, oh, it's similar to loop. And it basically is a loop. It calls itself until a certain condition is met. You want to use it when it's easier to use essentially syntactically when you want to use a recursive function. And also there's a special condition in JavaScript where you do need to use it. I don't have it off the top of my mind, but I will remember when we get to it in the class, or just later on when I remember. But there is a specific time where you will need to use recursion. But otherwise, it's actually really bad. Recursion is really slow in JavaScript as compared to other languages. Just because the way that JavaScript is built with its compilers, how it's run with the compilers in the browsers. So generally, it's best to stay away from recursion when it comes to JavaScript. But there is like one specific case I have to remember. I don't remember off the top of my head. All right. Any other questions? Nothing else? All right. Well, if that's it, you guys still have 2 more review sessions that you guys can use. So probably this Sunday coming up, and then maybe the following Sunday as well. Other than that, I hope everyone has a good evening, and then I'll see you guys on Monday and Tuesday.
Thanks, Omar.
Yeah, no worries.